No matter what you do on the internet, you're going to piss people off. The more people paying attention to you, the more people will hate you, and the more intense this hatred will become. And if you talk about any kind of dissident politics or taboo topics, there's a certain number of people out there that will straight up attempt to ruin your life. They will attack and harass your family members, try to get you fired from your job, and prevent you from getting another one, get your kids taken from you, get SWAT teams sent to your house, and so on. These people would try to kill you and burn down your house if they thought they could get away with it. Unfortunately, far too many people get started creating social media accounts or YouTube channels or blogs and have no concept of how exposed they are. In this video series, I'm going to attempt to give you a roadmap on how to minimize the chances of this happening. If this sounds like the kind of anonymity you're interested in, keep watching. But first, allow me to provide a few disclaimers. First, do not assume that following this guide will give you absolute protection. You cannot reduce your risk to zero. If the consequences of getting doxxed could cost you your life or a long prison sentence in your country, do not just blindly follow my advice. Do your own research, or perhaps avoid doing online activism at all. Second, this guide is not intended for situations where there's a strong possibility that you're under active surveillance, meaning you have reason to believe someone may seize your devices or compromise them with physical access. For instance, if you have to worry about whether someone opened up your laptop and installed a keylogger. If this is a threat you think is a possibility, please refer to the Hitchhiker's Guide to Online Anonymity, linked in the description. That guide covers much of what I cover here, but also includes extensive discussion of encrypting devices, creating plausible deniability, detecting if your device has been tampered with, and more. This video series is more intended to protect you from remote adversaries trying to figure out your real identity. Third, this guide will not be of much help to protect your existing accounts. If there's a digital paper trail tying your real identity to your accounts, there's not much that can be done about it now. You may need to essentially burn your existing accounts and start over. Just to give you an idea on whether or not this may be necessary, there's numerous ways your accounts could be tied to you. If you ever connected to them with your real IP address. If you paid for an Adobe product used to produce content with a credit card in your real name. If you ordered an obscure book off Amazon then discussed it on your channel. If you activated an account using a phone that is tied to your real name in some way, or even a burner phone that was used from your home. These are just a few of the many ways this could occur. If you believe this is the case with your accounts, yet abandoning them and starting over is out of the question, your best option is to get this book, Extreme Privacy, What It Takes to Disappear, and implement as much of it as possible. This way, even if people find out who you are, they won't be able to find where you live, what your phone number is, etc. Keep in mind though, this is a massive effort and much more difficult to do than just burning your accounts and starting over. Also, this won't necessarily protect your family members from harassment unless you implement all these techniques on them as well. If they can figure out who you are, finding out who you are related to is trivial. Fourth, depending on your level of technical expertise, implementing this guide could be challenging. I recommend using a highly secure version of Linux called Cubes. Cubes is known to be challenging even for people that already use Linux. But if you're a reasonably intelligent and motivated person, mastering the basics of Cubes is very achievable. You may be wondering why someone would recommend such an exotic operating system just to prevent being doxxed online. So allow me to explain. If you've ever read any books or articles or listened to podcasts in the privacy and security community, you may have heard of the term threat model. The idea is that you try to determine what your adversary is, and then determine what level of security practices you need to counter that threat. On one end, maybe you just don't want Facebook or Google collecting all your data. On the other end is somebody like Edward Snowden that has to deal with United States intelligence agencies. Most of us will obviously fall somewhere in between those two extremes. Threat modeling definitely makes some logical sense. You don't need to waste a lot of time and effort hiding from a threat that doesn't know you exist and doesn't care about what you're doing. But the concept of threat modeling relies on the assumption that you can accurately assess what your actual adversary is. Say you're a right-wing creator that really gets the attention of some organization like Antifa. So you have some highly ideological, possibly very technically competent lunatics with lots of time on their hands. You would assume this would be less of a threat than, say, a domestic three-letter agency. But I personally would not be so sure that groups like Antifa wouldn't have intelligence agency connections. even if they weren't working with them directly. Rogue employees of agencies like this may anonymously drop them tips so that these people do their dirty work for them. If you're a conservative, consider what you may believe these agencies have been doing recently. Do you really think this would be above them? Another thing to consider is that your threat model may change, not because of your content, but because of how big your audience is. If you're saying anything controversial and have several 100,000 subscribers on a YouTube channel, you can be certain that you'll be on the radar of some intelligence agency, either foreign or domestic. So with all of that in mind, I have some rather strict recommendations, especially when it comes to digital OPSEC. That said, if you have strong reason to believe that a three-letter agency is already interested in what you're doing, I would not count on these strategies being sufficient. These agencies certainly have sophisticated techniques and tools that aren't publicly known, but at the same time, they also aren't magic. Some of the solutions I suggest have frustrated these agencies in the past, but we have no idea what new capabilities they have now. We'll just use the best tools we have at our disposal, which will frustrate the more probable threats of technologically sophisticated activists using open-source intelligence. With those disclaimers out of the way, let's begin. Before we get to what technical solutions you need to hide your identity online, we need to discuss the basics. Even if your technical digital OPSEC is bulletproof, mistakes you make offline can still compromise you. Most people that are doxxed could have prevented it by some of these recommendations. First, keep the number of people among your friends and family with knowledge about your content to a bare minimum. Ideally, this number is 0. Relationships can change. If you have a falling out, that ex-friend or ex-girlfriend or ex-wife now potentially has tremendous leverage over you. If your account becomes somewhat large, your friends may not be able to resist telling their friends that you're the person behind that channel or account. Eventually, this information falls into the wrong hands, and you're doxxed. Keeping the number of people in the know to a bare minimum also grants you a level of plausible deniability. You could say, "Ask my friends and family. If I ran a YouTube channel, I would have told them." Next, do not give out any personal information of any kind, no matter how innocuous you may think it is. Don't provide your approximate age or what state or even region you live in. Don't mention whether you're single or married, or whether you have pets or not, or what your level of education is. You get the point. You may be tempted to use your education or work experience to establish that you have some authority on some subject or another. Try to resist this temptation. It's not like you would be able to prove these credentials anyway if you're trying to remain anonymous. The idea here is that any little scrap of information can narrow down the potential targets if somebody is trying to figure out who you are. As an example, say that you mention you have a degree in chemical engineering. Okay, that's fine. There's lots and lots of chemical engineers. Then say you live in Kentucky. How many chemical engineers are there in Kentucky? Probably quite a few, and not enough to narrow it down. Then say somebody figures out your first name somehow. Your anonymity reduces substantially with each scrap of personal information that is compromised. Similarly, do not discuss the topics you cover in your content with your friends and family in real life. This may be extremely difficult, but this also provides some level of plausible deniability if someone is successful in doxing you somehow. You could also take this further by expressing opinions on Facebook or other social media that are opposite to your own true opinions. Say your content promotes Trump or some other Republican. But on Facebook, under your real identity, you share Occupy Democrats posts. This is a simple method of disinformation, a topic that probably deserves its own video. Third, think hard about whether to record videos using your face or audio with your own voice. If you use your face and your account becomes large enough, you will probably be doxxed eventually. It's only a matter of time. If you use your own voice, it's possible someone will recognize your voice and speaking style. You should also be aware that technology exists that can take a voice print and match it to a database. Some financial institutions already do this to verify your identity. It should go without saying that the FBI and other law enforcement institutions use this as well. To what extent this is done at scale, I couldn't say. Also, it's almost certain that similar software is available to the general public, even if the large databases of voice prints are not. But if there is a sample of you speaking under your real identity, it could be used to confirm a match to your anonymous online content. It seems likely that as artificial intelligence, biometrics, and technological surveillance progresses, the more relevant a threat this will become over time. If you want to do video content with voiceovers, consider using text-to-speech software instead. There are very convincing sounding artificial intelligence-powered services already available at the time of publishing this video. If your content is just in text form, and you follow my advice with digital security, you should be reasonably safe. However, keep in mind that techniques exist to analyze your writing style. If there's any writing out there connected to your real identity, a sufficiently motivated and technically competent adversary could probably identify you. If this is a concern for you, you can take steps to alter your writing style. If you're an American, perhaps try to spell everything with British spelling. Use a thesaurus and change words up, rearrange sentences. Maybe run your text through a translation program to a foreign language, then translate it back to English. These are just some ideas. A full discussion of this topic is beyond the scope of this video. Do your own research. Fourth, and finally, do not discuss your own OPSEC publicly, meaning you never reveal what measures you've taken to protect yourself. If you never discuss it, your adversary will not know where to start or what to concentrate their efforts on. Ideally, you want to waste these people's time so that eventually they give up. If you brag about how untouchable you are, they will know to avoid the easier low-hanging fruit and concentrate on more sophisticated methods. As an introduction, I will leave it here. In the next video, we will begin to cover the digital techniques of this guide.